Hello, this is Michael Sean Comerford with the story cycle, The Atlantic Coast and Climate Crisis. And I'm here in Spring Lake on the Jersey Shore in front of an earth mover because they have to use these things to get more sand because they lose sand out to the ocean. But also they do a lot of shoring up of their seaside in order to buffer them from extreme weather. And these updates are to show you what is happening behind the scenes and behind the interviews along the bike ride portion of it. It's very cold out. It's been in the low 30s and 20s during the evenings, and uh, and and the days have been there's been some rain and storm events that I've gone through along the way. And my last update was in Providence, and I was able to go around the Brown campus a little bit there, and along the shoreline of Rhode Island with all these towns, and then Connecticut with all these towns that were full of history of whaling, shipbuilding, and fishing, and so forth. And they had these grand marinas now, and these towns are architecturally gorgeous, and the shorelines are low. And so the interviews were very interesting because everyone seems to be realizing their vulnerability to these weather events and to the climate as it changes. And one of the towns I went to in Connecticut was Mystic, and I was watching how art imitates life because uh, I was riding through Thanksgiving on the way. Now it's Christmas season, so that kind of cusp of time. And I watched them putting a star on top of their Christmas tree at the center of town, and I was unable to catch it with my camera, but it was a beautiful thing to watch, and they make a lot of Hallmark movies there, I guess, with Christmas themes. And I thought, well, art imitating life. And then I went over to Mystic Pizza in 1988. There was a kind of a famous movie called Mystic Pizza with Julia Roberts about the love lives, the tangled love lives of the waitresses. Well, I got talking with the bartender waitress there, and she talked, oh, yes, well, some of the uh, guys here are a little flirty. And in fact, one of the guys here, you just saw him walk out. He brought me he brought me a he went off on a trip to Chicago and brought me back a case of Chicago hot dogs along with the sport peppers and pickles. I go, well, that is kind of flirty, but also it is a little like the movie Mystic Pizza, as well as the Hallmark movies for Christmas, and I loved it. And but come on through. And so then I went down to New London and got some great interviews there too in Connecticut. But I took the Cross Sound Ferry over to Orient Point in Long Island, and it went the whole length of Long Island, and from wine country to Coney Island to Brooklyn, and across the Manhattan Bridge to Manhattan. But I went along the barrier islands also on the South Shore, and didn't really realize uh, that Jones Beach is the most popular beach on the Atlantic coast. And so I had to go out to Jones Beach. It wasn't on my map, but I'm adding a lot of miles just to go along the shoreline. And so I went out. Then they actually had an environmental center, an energy and environmental center, and got some fabulous interviews with people that were very aware of the climate. And uh, so I went along. I went along again along these barrier islands, and saw Rockaway Beach, and I crossed the bridge over a bunch of bridges, but went over Jamaica Bay and along Sheepheads Bay and Brighton Beach and down to Coney Island, which was fabulous. Mostly closed, but all the languages being taught. It was hard to get interviews there, but there were people speaking Russian and Chinese and all sorts of French all over, and and so it's hard to get someone to speak English. But and it wasn't. It was closed down, and when a weather event was coming, it was the big rainstorm was coming, and I had 4 flats before this, and I had a new tire, and up came the storm, and during the storm, I mean, it was very rough, and I was getting honked at by all the New York drivers, even though I was, riding as hard as I could through the storm, and you know, uh, creating a hazard basically. And but my tire went flat in the storm, so I had to find a place to stay that night, and I changed the tire overnight. But for a while there, it didn't look good because I was, uh, I was downhearted in Brooklyn with a flat tire in the middle of a storm and being honked at and so forth. And but got across to Manhattan and interviewed some great people in Central Park and then in the Lower East Side, and then took the ferry across to Brooklyn so I could get a picture of the Statue of Liberty. And I did. And now I'm on the South Shore. Again, it is freezing cold. The rain and the wind. I've had a couple of big events already, and more are on their way. And but it's all outward examples of what's happening on a long-term basis, which is the climate is changing, and these are just this is just the weather along the way, and I'm glad that you can see that as we're going. And so I have to get to Trenton, as close to Trenton tonight as I can, and I'll see you on the road. Right on.